The smell of charred flesh still clings to my nostrils from when I first witnessed Kythera's defiance. My name is Commissar Thaddeus Vex, survivor of the 13th Black Crusade's forgotten battleground. 17 billion souls should have died screaming when the warp storms hit, but they didn't. You think that makes me blessed to survive, but you don't know what I've seen. This world should have been another footnote in the Imperium's endless catalogue of martyred planets. The astropaths went silent. The warp routes collapsed. Even the Emperor's light seemed to abandon this forsaken rock. But Kythera refused its ordained death. It fought back with something worse than chaos, worse than Xenos corruption. It fought with hope. And in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, hope is the most dangerous heresy of all. This is my testimony of the planet that broke the fundamental law of the universe, that all things must die. Chapter 1. The World Before the Storm. Kythera Prime hung in the void like a blue-green jewel, its 3 moons casting silver light across cities that had known 10,000 years of peace. I stood on the observation deck of the Imperial Navy cruiser, Righteous Fury, watching the planet slowly rotate beneath us. The sight should have filled me with pride. Another loyal world of the Emperor, productive and faithful. Instead, it filled me with an inexplicable dread. Beautiful, isn't it, Commissar? Captain Mordian joined me at the viewport, his weathered face reflecting the planet's glow. 27 hive cities, each more prosperous than the last. PDF forces that actually know which end of a laser gun fires. Citizens who pay their tithes with smiles. If every world in the Imperium were like Kythera, we'd have conquered the galaxy twice over by now. I nodded, though something in his words bothered me. Perhaps it was the way he said, beautiful, as if he were looking at a corpse laid out for viewing. Or perhaps it was the intelligence reports I'd been studying for the past 3 standard weeks. Kythera was too perfect, too untouched by the galaxy's endless wars. How long since their last major conflict? I asked, though I already knew the answer. 2,467 years, Mordian replied without hesitation. The Orc incursion of M39 lasted exactly 93 days before the Greenskins were completely eradicated. No Imperial Guard intervention required. They handled it themselves. That was what bothered me. In a galaxy where every world faced constant threats, from chaos cults to Xenos raiders to simple rebellion, Kythera had remained pristine. Their planetary defense force was well-equipped and well-trained, but they'd never faced a real test. Their faith seemed genuine, but it had never been questioned under the pressure of true hardship. Their loyalty was absolute, but it had never been challenged by desperation. The elevator doors whispered open behind us, and Astropath Prime Callista emerged, her augmetic eyes dim with exhaustion. The Psyker moved with the careful precision of someone navigating a world she could no longer see with natural sight, her staff tapping against the deck plates in a rhythm that seemed almost musical. "Commissar Vex," she said, her voice carrying that hollow quality common to those who spent their days listening to the warp's whispers. "I've completed the psychic survey of Kythera's population. The results are unusual." "How so?" I asked, though part of me already dreaded the answer. "Their psychic resonance is remarkably stable. No chaos cults, no heretical practices, no hidden corruption. But there's something else, something I've never encountered before." She paused, her augmetic eyes whirring as they focused on something only she could see. They're all connected. Not through the warp, not through technology. Something deeper, something older. Captain Mordian shifted uncomfortably. "Connected how?" "I don't know," Callista admitted. "But when I touched the edge of it, I felt peace. Complete, absolute peace. It was terrifying." Before I could respond, the ship's klaxons began wailing. Red emergency lights bathed the observation deck in crimson as Mordian's Vox crackled to life. "Captain to the bridge immediately. Priority Alpha emergency." We rushed through the corridors, past crew members who moved with the practiced efficiency of Imperial Navy veterans. The bridge was a hive of activity when we arrived, servitors and human crew working at their stations, while Navigator Quintus stood before the primary display, his normally pale face now ashen with fear. "Report," Mordian barked. "Sir, massive warp storm forming in the subsector," Navigator Quintus said, his third eye covered but still weeping blood from the effort of observing the approaching tempest. "It's unlike anything in the Imperial records. The stormfront stretches across 17 systems, and it's moving fast. Kythera Prime lies directly in its path." The main holographic display showed the storm as a writhing mass of purple and black, advancing through space like a living thing. Where it passed, stars winked out of existence or erupted into bizarre configurations. Entire systems simply vanished from the sensors. "Time until it reaches Kythera?" I asked. 6 hours, 14 minutes, came the reply from the sensor station. "Evacuation possibilities." "Negative, sir. The storm is interfering with warp travel across the entire subsector. We're trapped here until it passes." I stared at the display, watching the storm approach. This was how worlds died in the 41st millennium. Not with the glory of heroic last stands, but with the cosmic indifference of forces beyond human comprehension. Kythera's perfect record, their peaceful existence, their unwavering faith. None of it would matter when the warp claimed them. "Vox the planetary government," I ordered. "Tell them they have 6 hours to make peace with the Emperor." But even as I spoke, I couldn't shake the memory of Astropath Callista's words. Something connected the people of Kythera, something older than the Imperium, perhaps older than humanity itself. In my decades of service to the Emperor, I'd learned to trust my instincts, and my instincts told me that Kythera Prime would not die quietly. The next few hours passed in a blur of desperate activity. The Righteous Fury and her escort vessels moved into defensive positions around the planet, though we all knew it was a futile gesture. You don't fight warp storms with guns and armor. You endure them if you're lucky. You die screaming if you're not. Down on the planet's surface, 27 hive cities prepared for the end. Emergency broadcasts echoed through hab blocks and administrative centers, calling for calm and prayer. The Planetary Defense Force took up positions that would be meaningless when reality itself began to unravel, but they did it anyway because duty demanded it. I found myself returning to the observation deck as the storm drew closer, now visible to the naked eye as a wall of impossible colors advancing through space. Astropath Callista stood beside me, her augmetic eyes fixed on the planet below. "They're praying," she said quietly. "All of them. 27 billion souls, praying in perfect unison. I've never felt anything like it." "Praying for deliverance?" "No," she whispered. "They're praying for strength, for endurance. They know they're about to die, Commissar, but they're not afraid. They're ready." The storm reached Kythera's outer atmosphere exactly 6 hours and 14 minutes after our first detection. We watched through the observation ports as the planet's blue-green surface began to writhe and twist, consumed by energies that shouldn't exist in real space. The 3 moons cracked like eggs, their debris forming impossible spirals that defied the laws of physics. I waited for the screaming to begin. It never came. Instead, through the static and interference of the storm, we heard something else. Singing. 27 billion voices raised in harmony, their voices carrying across the void through channels that had nothing to do with technology. It was the most beautiful and terrible sound I'd ever heard. "Emperor preserve us," Captain Mordian whispered. "What are they doing down there?" I didn't answer because I didn't know. But as the warp storm raged around Kythera Prime, as reality bent and twisted in ways that should have reduced the planet to cosmic dust, the singing continued. And slowly, impossibly, the planet began to fight back. Chapter 2. The Storm's Embrace. The first sign that something was wrong, or perhaps right, depending on your perspective, came 12 hours into the storm. The Righteous Fury's sensors, designed to function in the worst conditions the galaxy could offer, should have been completely blind in the warp maelstrom surrounding us. Instead, They were picking up impossible readings from Kythera's surface. "Sir," sensor operator Valdris called out, her voice tight with confusion. "I'm detecting structured activity on the planet. Population centers are still intact. Power grids are functioning. It's as if the storm isn't touching them." I leaned over her console, studying the data streams that made no sense according to everything I knew about warp phenomena. Cities that should have been reduced to screaming chaos showed the regular patterns of normal human activity. Factories continued their production cycles. Transportation networks maintained their schedules. Children, according to the bioscanners, were attending school. "This is impossible," Captain Mordian muttered, studying the readings over my shoulder. "The warp doesn't work this way. It doesn't leave anything untouched." But even as he spoke, we could see through the observation ports that he was wrong. The storm raged around Kythera Prime in a sphere of twisted reality, but the planet itself remained unchanged. It sat in the eye of the maelstrom, like a pearl in the mouth of a beast, serene and untouchable. Navigator Quintus approached us, his third eye weeping constantly now from the strain of observing the impossible. "Commissar, I need to report something. The storm, it's not natural. Something is controlling it, shaping it, and that something is down on the planet." "Explain," I demanded. "The warp currents around Kythera are being actively manipulated. Not by psychers, I'd detect that. Not by technology. Our instruments would register the signatures. It's something else. Something that exists in the space between thought and reality." I felt a chill run down my spine. In my years serving the Emperor, I'd encountered many things that defied explanation. Demons that wore human faces. Chaos cults that turned children into living weapons. Worlds where the very air whispered heresy. But this was different. This felt clean, pure. And that terrified me more than any demon ever could. "Vox traffic from the surface," Communications Officer Hayes announced. "They're requesting permission to assist our vessels." "Assist us?" Captain Mordian laughed bitterly. "They're sitting in the middle of a warp storm. What could they possibly do to help us?" But before any of us could respond, our questions were answered. Through the observation ports, we watched as streams of golden light began to emanate from Kythera's surface. The light moved with purpose and intelligence, flowing up through the storm's chaotic energies without being touched by them. When it reached our ships, it formed protective barriers around our hulls. The effect was immediate. The screaming of tortured metal that had been our constant companion since entering the storm fell silent. The random power fluctuations that had plagued our systems stabilized. The crew members who had been showing early signs of warp exposure, the twitching, the whispered prayers, the fearful glances at shadows, suddenly seemed calm and focused. "What in the Emperor's name?" Captain Mordian began. "They're protecting us," Astropath Callista said, wonder evident in her voice. "The entire planet is acting as a shield, holding back the warp's influence. Not just for themselves, but for us too." I activated the Vox system, opening a channel to Kythera's planetary government. The response came immediately, clear and strong despite the cosmic chaos surrounding us. "Imperial vessels, this is Governor Meridian of Kythera Prime. We extend the Emperor's peace to you in these trying times. Please accept our protection until the storm passes." Governor Meridian's voice was calm, measured, with no trace of the fear or desperation I would have expected from someone facing annihilation. I keyed the response channel. "Governor Meridian, this is Commissar Thaddeus Vex aboard the Righteous Fury. Explain what you're doing down there. Explain how you're surviving this storm." There was a pause, and when the governor spoke again, I could hear something in his voice that made my blood run cold. Not malice or corruption, but absolute certainty. The kind of certainty that came from faith so pure, it bordered on madness. "We are children of this world, Commissar. We have been here for 10,000 years, and we will be here for 10,000 more. The storm comes and goes, but Kythera endures. We endure. That's not an answer, Governor. It is the only answer that matters. Would you like to come down to the surface? We would be honored to receive you. Every instinct I had screamed against accepting that invitation. In my experience, when something seemed too good to be true in the 41st millennium, it usually was. Planets that survived impossible odds typically did so by making bargains that damned their souls. People who showed such calm in the face of chaos usually served masters other than the Emperor. But the alternative was staying aboard ship while a warp storm raged around us, hoping that whatever force was protecting us would continue to do so. And I needed answers. I needed to understand what was happening here. "Prepare a drop pod," I told Captain Mordian. "I'm going down." "Sir, with respect, that's madness. We don't know what's down there." "That's exactly why I need to go." I turned to face him fully. If this is some new form of chaos corruption, I need to identify it before it spreads. If it's genuine... I paused, not wanting to voice the possibility. If it's genuine, the Imperium needs to know about it. 2 hours later, I was strapped into a drop pod with a squad of the ship's best armsmen. As we descended through the storm, I watched through the pod's viewports as the golden light that protected us grew stronger. What had seemed like simple illumination from orbit revealed itself to be something far more complex. Streams of energy that moved like living things, forming patterns that seemed almost like writing in a language I couldn't read. The drop pod's landing systems activated as we broke through Kythera's atmosphere. Instead of the charred wasteland I expected, I saw rolling green hills dotted with cities that gleamed like jewels in the strange golden light. The sky above was a swirling maelstrom of impossible colors, but the land below was peaceful, untouched. We touched down in the capital city's landing zone, and as the pod's doors opened, I stepped out into air that should have been thick with the stench of warp corruption. Instead, I breathed in the scent of flowers and growing things. The temperature was perfect, the humidity comfortable. It was like stepping into paradise. Governor Meridian was waiting for us, accompanied by a small retinue of officials. He was a tall, dignified man in his middle years, with silver hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. His clothes were simple but well made, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had never known real fear. "Welcome to Kythera Prime, Commissar Vex," he said, extending his hand in greeting. "We are honored by your presence in our hour of trial." I studied his face carefully, looking for signs of mutation, corruption, or madness. I found none. His grip was firm and warm, his eyes clear and focused. When he smiled, it was with genuine warmth, rather than the predatory gleam I'd learned to associate with heretics. "Your hour of trial seems to be going rather well, Governor," I said, gesturing at the peaceful city around us. "The storm will pass," he replied simply. "They always do. Would you like to see how we weather such things? I think you'll find it illuminating." As we walked through the capital's streets, I was struck by the normalcy of it all. Citizens went about their daily business, shopping, working, raising children. They nodded respectfully as we passed, but showed no signs of the desperate fanaticism I'd seen in other crisis situations. These people weren't clinging to their faith because it was all they had left. They believed because they had seen their beliefs validated. "How long has your world been able to do this?" I asked as we approached what appeared to be a massive cathedral at the city's heart. "Since the beginning," Governor Meridian replied. "Since the first colonists arrived 10,000 years ago. This world chose us, Commissar, just as we chose it. We are bound together by something stronger than simple habitation." The cathedral doors opened before us, revealing an interior that defied architectural logic. The space inside was impossibly vast, filled with golden light that seemed to emanate from the very air itself. And in the center of it all, surrounded by 27 billion people, somehow gathered in a space that should only hold thousands, was something that made my heart skip a beat. It was a pillar of pure light, reaching from floor to ceiling, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the human heartbeat. And as I watched, I realized what I was seeing. Every person on Kythera Prime was connected to this thing. their life force flowing through it and back to them in an endless cycle. They weren't being drained or controlled. They were being strengthened, unified, made part of something greater than themselves. "What is it?" I whispered. "The heart of our world," Governor Meridian replied. "The source of our strength. When the storm threatens to tear reality apart, we simply choose not to let it. All of us, together, with one voice and one will." I stared at the pillar of light, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't chaos corruption, chaos divided and consumed. This wasn't Xenos technology. No alien race I knew of could create something so fundamentally human in its nature. This was something else entirely, something new. And as I watched 27 billion people stand united against the fury of the warp itself, I began to understand why I'd been afraid. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, hope was indeed the most dangerous heresy of all. Chapter 3. The Heart of Unity. Standing before the pillar of light, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades of service to the Emperor. Doubt. Not doubt in my duty or my faith, but doubt in my understanding of what those things meant. The golden radiance that filled the cathedral seemed to peer into my soul, weighing my thoughts and finding them wanting. "You're afraid," Governor Meridian observed, his voice gentle but perceptive. "Not of corruption or heresy. You're afraid of hope. Hope is a luxury the Imperium cannot afford," I replied, falling back on the familiar words of my training. Hope breeds complacency. Complacency breeds weakness. Weakness breeds death. And yet here we stand, 27 billion souls strong, turning back the storm through hope alone. The governor gestured to the pillar, where streams of light flowed like liquid starlight. "Tell me, Commissar, what do you see when you look upon this?" I forced myself to study the phenomenon with analytical detachment, applying everything I'd learned about warp phenomena, psyker abilities, and heretical practices. The pillar stood roughly 30 meters tall, its diameter perhaps 10 meters at the base, tapering to a point that seemed to pierce the cathedral's impossible ceiling. The light wasn't harsh or blinding, but warm and welcoming, like sunlight filtering through stained glass. More importantly, it showed none of the characteristics I'd learned to associate with chaos corruption. There were no writhing tentacles of unreality, no whispered promises of power, no gradual degradation of the surrounding environment. Instead, everything touched by the light seemed to become more itself. The stone walls more solid, the air more breathable, the people more human. I see 27 billion people somehow gathered in a space that should only hold thousands, I said carefully. I see a phenomenon that defies known laws of physics and psychic science. I see something that by all rights should be impossible. And what does your heart see? The question caught me off guard. Commissars were trained to suppress emotional responses, to rely on logic and doctrine rather than feelings. But as I stared into the pillar's depths, I found myself remembering things I'd tried to forget. The sound of children laughing in a hive city before the Tyranids came. The look in a guardsman's eyes when he realized his sacrifice had saved his comrades. The moment of perfect silence after a successful prayer, when the Emperor's presence seemed almost tangible. "Peace," I admitted reluctantly. "I see peace." "Yes," Governor Meridian nodded. "The peace that comes from knowing you are not alone. The peace of unity without uniformity, strength without oppression. This is what Kythera has always been about." Around us, the 27 billion citizens of Kythera Prime stood in perfect harmony, their voices joining in a song that had no words but needed none. Men and women of every age and occupation, from the youngest child to the most ancient elder, all connected by bonds that transcended simple communication. I watched as emotions and thoughts flowed between them like electricity through a circuit, creating a network of shared experience that would have made any tech priest weep with envy. "How is this possible?" I asked. "How do you fit so many people in this space?" "The cathedral exists partially outside normal space-time," explained Sister Superior Cassandra, a member of the governor's retinue who had remained silent until now. Her power armor bore the iconography of the Order's militant, but also symbols I didn't recognize. When we gather here, we exist in a state of quantum superposition. We are here, but also everywhere on Kythera. We are many, but also one. That's impossible, I protested. Quantum mechanics doesn't work on macro scales. You can't have 27 billion people existing in multiple states simultaneously. Can't we? Sister Cassandra smiled, and I noticed that her eyes held the same storm cloud grey as the governor's. Look around you, Commissar. Use your eyes, not your preconceptions. I did, as she suggested, and slowly began to perceive the truth of what I was seeing. The 27 billion people weren't actually physically present in the cathedral. They were projected here, their consciousness temporarily separated from their bodies, while their physical forms continued their daily lives across the planet. It was the most sophisticated application of psychic science I'd ever encountered, and it was being performed by ordinary citizens with no apparent psycha training. The children, I said, focusing on a group of young people who seemed to be leading one section of the great song. They're participating in this. How do you protect them from warp exposure? The same way we protect everyone, Governor Meridian replied. Through unity. When 27 billion souls stand together, when they think and feel and hope as one, the warp cannot touch them. There are no individual minds for demons to corrupt, no isolated fears for chaos to exploit. We become something greater than the sum of our parts. It was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. If Kythera's method could be replicated on other worlds, if humanity could truly unite in this fashion, the constant threat of chaos corruption might become a thing of the past. Entire sectors could be protected. Entire systems could stand against the darkness without requiring constant vigilance from the Commissariat or the Inquisition. But the cost? Individual identity, I said aloud, voicing my concern. Free will. What happens to personal choice when everyone thinks as one? What happens to personal choice when everyone dies? Sister Cassandra countered. We are still individuals, Commissar. Watch carefully. She gestured to different sections of the crowd, and I began to notice subtle variations in the great song. Here, a group of engineers contributed technical harmonies that spoke of precision and innovation. There, a cluster of artists added emotional depths that painted pictures in sound. Children brought joy and wonder. Elders contributed wisdom and patience. Soldiers added strength and determination. We are unified in purpose, but diverse in contribution, the governor explained. Each person brings their own gifts, their own perspective, their own strengths, but we channel those gifts toward a common goal, the protection and prosperity of our world. I walked closer to the pillar, studying the streams of light that flowed through it. Now that I knew what to look for, I could see the individual threads that made up the greater whole. Each person's life force was distinct, maintaining its own color and rhythm while contributing to the larger pattern. It was like looking at a vast tapestry woven from 27 billion different threads, each essential to the overall design. How did this begin? I asked. How did your people first discover they could do this? The records go back to the original colonization, Governor Meridian replied. The first settlers were refugees from the age of strife, fleeing worlds consumed by war and madness. When they arrived here, they found something waiting for them. Not intelligence exactly, more like potential. The planet itself seemed to resonate with human consciousness, amplifying our natural psychic abilities without the usual dangers. The usual dangers being chaos corruption and demonic possession. Precisely. Kythera acts as a filter, allowing only the positive aspects of psychic energy to flourish while blocking out the negative influences. Over the generations, our people learned to work together, to combine their abilities into something greater than any individual could achieve. I thought about the implications of that statement. If Kythera Prime possessed some natural defense against chaos corruption, some inherent quality that allowed safe psychic expression, then it represented something unprecedented in Imperial history. Most worlds with strong psychic phenomena were eventually consumed by the forces they tried to harness. Kythera had found a way to harness those forces safely. "There's something else," Sister Cassandra said, approaching us with a data slate in her hands. "Something you need to see before you make your report to the Imperium." She activated the slate, displaying what appeared to be astronomical data. Star charts, sensor readings, gravitational measurements. It took me a moment to realize what I was looking at. "This is the storm," I said. "You're tracking its movement. More than that, we're predicting its path, its duration, its effects. The storm that currently engulfs us is part of a larger pattern, Commissar. It will rage for exactly 17 days, then dissipate completely. The next storm of this magnitude won't occur for another 312 years. You can predict warp storm activity?" I stared at the data in disbelief. "That should be impossible. The warp doesn't follow predictable patterns." "It does when you have 27 billion minds working together to calculate the variables," Governor Meridian explained. "Our combined consciousness can perceive patterns that no individual could detect. We see the warp not as chaos, but as a complex system with its own rules and rhythms." The implications were staggering. If Kythera could predict warp phenomena, they could potentially warn other worlds of approaching storms. They could provide safe passage routes for Imperial shipping. They could turn humanity's greatest disadvantage in the galaxy, our vulnerability to chaos, into a manageable challenge. But even as the possibilities excited me, I felt a chill of foreboding. The Imperium did not react well to sudden changes, even beneficial ones. Too many worlds had been virus-bombed for the crime of being too successful, too different, too threatening to established order. If I reported what I was seeing here, Kythera Prime might find itself facing exterminatus rather than celebration. "You realize what this means," I said quietly. "You realize how the Imperium will respond to a world that claims to control warp phenomena." "We know," the governor replied sadly. "We've always known that our differences would eventually draw attention. But we also know that hiding was never an option. The galaxy is changing, Commissar. The old ways, the ways of fear and suspicion and endless war, are leading humanity toward extinction. We offer an alternative that could be seen as heretical. Everything new is initially seen as heretical. The question is whether wisdom or paranoia will ultimately prevail." I looked around the cathedral one more time, taking in the sight of 27 billion people united in purpose and song. They were still singing, their voices creating harmonies that seemed to reshape reality itself. Above us, the warp storm raged with cosmic fury, but it could not touch this place, could not corrupt these people, could not destroy what they had built together. In 17 days, the storm would pass, but the questions it had raised would linger much longer. What would I tell Captain Mordian? What would go into my official report? How could I possibly explain what I had seen without triggering the very destruction I hoped to prevent? As if sensing my thoughts, Governor Meridian placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Come," he said. "Let us show you the rest of our world. Let us show you what humanity can become when it chooses hope over fear." Chapter 4. The Weight of Truth. The tour of Kythera Prime that followed challenged everything I thought I knew about human civilization in the 41st millennium. Governor Meridian and Sister Cassandra led me through cities where crime was virtually non-existent, not through oppression, but through genuine community. I witnessed factories where workers collaborated with such perfect efficiency that production quotas were exceeded by 300%, while maintaining safety standards that put most hive worlds to shame. In the agricultural zones, I observed farming techniques that seemed to coax impossible yields from soil that should have been exhausted after millennia of cultivation. The secret, I learned, was the same unity principle that protected them from the warp storm. Farmers didn't just tend their crops, they communicated with them on some fundamental level, understanding exactly what each plant needed and when. "It's not telepathy," explained agricultural coordinator Marcus Thorne as we walked through fields of grain that swayed in perfect synchronization despite the absence of wind. "It's more like enhanced intuition. When you're connected to every other consciousness on the planet, you develop a sensitivity to all forms of life. The plants aren't sentient in any way we'd recognize, but they have needs, patterns, rhythms. We've learned to perceive those patterns. I knelt and touched one of the grain stalks, feeling nothing but ordinary plant matter. Yet around me, I could see the subtle signs of something beyond normal agriculture. The crops grew in mathematical spirals that maximized sunlight exposure. Root systems formed networks that shared nutrients with perfect efficiency. Even the insects that moved through the fields seemed to follow choreographed patterns that enhanced pollination while preventing destructive infestations. The yields must be incredible, I observed. Enough to feed 50 billion people, Marcus confirmed. We export food to 17 neighboring systems, even in years when they face crop failures or natural disasters. It's part of our contribution to the greater Imperium. That gave me pause. Kythera Prime wasn't hoarding their advantages or isolating themselves from Imperial society. They were actively supporting other worlds, sharing their prosperity while keeping the methods of that prosperity carefully concealed. It was a delicate balance, one that required both wisdom and considerable courage. "Doesn't anyone ask questions about your productivity levels?" I asked. Of course they do. We tell them we've developed advanced agricultural techniques, which is true enough. We submit detailed reports on crop rotation, soil management, irrigation systems, all perfectly conventional methods that we do indeed employ. We simply don't mention the other aspects of our farming practices. It was a masterful example of misdirection. By being genuinely helpful to the Imperium, by exceeding their obligations and supporting their neighbors, Kythera Prime had earned the kind of benign neglect that allowed them to pursue their unique path without attracting unwanted scrutiny. Until now. Our next stop was a medical facility that made me question whether I was still on the same planet. The hospital's emergency ward, which should have been filled with the injured and dying of a world under siege by cosmic forces, instead hummed with quiet efficiency. Patients recovered from injuries and illnesses at rates that bordered on miraculous, while medical staff worked with the kind of perfect coordination usually seen only in elite military units. How? Was all I could ask as I watched a surgeon repair complex spinal damage without seeming to look at his instruments, his hands guided by an intuitive understanding of exactly where each nerve and blood vessel lay. When 27 billion minds can share knowledge instantaneously, medical expertise becomes cumulative, explained Chief Medical Officer Dr. Helena Voss. Every successful treatment, every diagnostic insight, every therapeutic breakthrough is immediately available to every medical professional on the planet. We learn from each other's successes and failures in real time. But the individual skill requirements are still essential. Connection enhances ability. It doesn't replace it. Our surgeons still train for decades to develop their techniques. Our researchers still conduct experiments and analyze data. Our nurses still provide compassionate care to their patients. But when they work with the accumulated wisdom of our entire medical community. I watched a young medical student performing a diagnostic procedure that should have required years of experience to master. Her movements were confident and precise, guided not just by her own limited training, but by the collective knowledge of thousands of senior physicians. It was the most efficient transfer of expertise I'd ever witnessed. Genetic therapy, Dr. Voss continued, leading me to another section of the facility. We've eliminated most hereditary diseases, not through technological intervention, but through collective biological awareness. When an entire population can sense genetic patterns, identifying and correcting harmful mutations becomes a community effort. That sounds like you're describing some form of controlled evolution. In a sense, we are. But it's not imposed from above or directed by any central authority. It's a natural consequence of unity consciousness. Parents instinctively understand their genetic compatibility. Potentially harmful recessive traits are naturally selected against. Beneficial adaptations spread more quickly through the population. The implications were staggering. If Kythera's population was actively guiding their own genetic development, they could theoretically eliminate not just disease but any biological limitation. Enhanced intelligence, improved physical capabilities, extended lifespans, all could be achieved through the same collective consciousness that protected them from chaos. "How long do your people live?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer would disturb me. "The current average lifespan is approximately 400 standard years," Dr. Voss replied matter-of-factly, though that number continues to increase as we refine our understanding of biological processes. 400 years. In a galaxy where most citizens of the Imperium were lucky to reach 100, Kythera Prime had achieved lifespans that rivaled those of the Adeptus Astartes. And they'd done it without genetic modification, life extension technology, or pacts with dark powers. They'd done it through cooperation. Our final stop was the Planetary Defense Center, where I finally got answers to the military questions that had been nagging at me since our arrival. General Patricia Kane, commander of Kythera's PDF forces, was a woman in her apparent 50s who carried herself with the bearing of a veteran warrior. Only the storm cloud grey of her eyes marked her as a native of this world. "You want to know how we fight," she said without preamble as we entered the command center. "How we've managed to remain unconquered for over 2 millennia without significant military support from the Imperium." The thought had occurred to me, I admitted, studying the tactical displays that covered the center's walls. They showed defensive positions, fleet movements, and resource allocations with a level of detail that suggested considerable military sophistication. "The same unity that protects us from warp storms makes us nearly invincible in conventional warfare," General Kane explained. "When every soldier shares the awareness of every other soldier, when tactical information flows instantaneously across the entire battlefield, when every citizen can contribute to the defense effort regardless of their physical location, traditional military tactics become obsolete." She activated a holographic display showing a simulation of the last major conflict, the Orc incursion 2,000 years ago. I watched in fascination as Kythera's forces engaged the Greenskin invasion with perfect coordination. Every unit knew exactly where every other unit was positioned. Supply lines adjusted automatically to changing battlefield conditions. Artillery strikes were timed to the microsecond to avoid friendly fire while maximizing enemy casualties. "The Orcs never stood a chance," General Kane said with quiet satisfaction. "They fought as individuals or small groups, while we fought as a single organism with 27 billion brains directing its actions. It was less of a battle and more of an extermination." "But surely that level of coordination requires some form of central command structure." "No central command beyond the collective will of our people. When the invasion began, every citizen on Kythera immediately became part of the defense effort. Farmers provided food and logistics support. Engineers designed fortifications. Children served as messengers and scouts. Elders contributed strategic wisdom. Scientists developed new weapons and tactics in real time. Even our artists played a role, maintaining morale and creating propaganda to demoralize our enemies." I studied the simulation more carefully, noting details that became clear only with repeated viewing. The Orcs hadn't just been defeated, they'd been completely outmaneuvered at every turn. Their own brutish cunning, normally their greatest military asset, had been rendered useless against an enemy that could predict their moves before they made them. "How many casualties did you take?" I asked. 17,436 dead, General Kane replied without hesitation. "Each one mourned by the entire planet. Each one remembered in our collective consciousness forever." 17,000 casualties in a war against an Orc warg that had numbered in the millions. By Imperial standards, it was a miraculous victory. By any reasonable standard, it was impossible. As the day wore on, and I saw more of Kythera Prime's achievements, a terrible certainty began to grow in my mind. This world represented everything the Imperium claimed to fight for: human unity, prosperity, security, progress. But it achieved those goals through methods that would be considered heretical by every major institution of Imperial government. The ecclesiarchy, would see blasphemy in their collective consciousness. The Inquisition would suspect chaos corruption. The Adeptus Mechanicus would condemn their biological modifications as tech heresy. Worst of all, Kythera Prime's very existence proved that the Imperium's current methods were not just flawed, but actively counterproductive. 10,000 years of fear, oppression, and endless war had not protected humanity from its enemies. They had simply created new forms of suffering while perpetuating the very weaknesses that made humanity vulnerable in the first place. "You're troubled," Governor Meridian observed as we returned to the capital city. The warp storm still raged overhead, but it seemed distant and unimportant compared to the storm of conflicting thoughts raging in my mind. "You've given me an impossible choice," I replied. "Report what I've seen here and watch your world burn under orbital bombardment, or file a false report and betray everything I've sworn to uphold." "There is a third option." "Which is?" "Tell the truth. All of it. But tell it to someone who has the wisdom to understand what it means." I stopped walking and stared at him. "You want me to contact the Inquisition directly?" "I want you to contact Inquisitor Elena Vex of the Ordo Xenos." The name hit me like a bolt of lightning. Elena Vex. My sister, whom I hadn't seen or spoken to in 40 years. Elena, who had chosen the path of the Inquisition, while I chose the Commissariat. Elena, whose last letter had spoken of growing doubts about the Imperium's methods and the need for new approaches to old problems. "How do you know about my sister?" I asked quietly. "We know many things, Commissar. The question is whether you trust us enough to help us share what we know with someone who might actually listen." I looked up at the storm raging overhead, then down at the peaceful city that stood defiant against cosmic forces that should have destroyed it hours ago. I thought about everything I'd seen, everything I'd learned, everything I'd been forced to question about the nature of humanity's struggle for survival in a hostile galaxy. "She's investigating tyrannid adaptation patterns in the Ultima Segmentum," I said finally. "Last I heard, she was based out of Macraga." "Then that's where we'll send our message," Governor Meridian said with a smile. "Together." Chapter 5. The Message Beyond the Storm. The decision to contact Inquisitor Elena Vex required careful planning and considerable courage from both sides. Governor Meridian couldn't simply send an astropathic message explaining Kythera's situation. Such communications were routinely monitored by multiple Imperial agencies, and any mention of their unique abilities would trigger immediate investigation. I couldn't use my authority as a commissar to bypass normal channels without raising questions about why I was circumventing established protocols. Instead, we crafted a message that would mean everything to Eleanor and nothing to anyone else who might intercept it. Sister Cassandra led us to a chamber deep beneath the cathedral, where Kythera's most skilled psychers worked to maintain their planet's defenses. Unlike the collective consciousness that protected the surface, this was a more traditional psychic facility, equipped with astropathic choirs and long-range communication arrays. "The message must be embedded in your own psychic signature," explained Master Astropath Cornelius, an elderly man whose augmetic eyes had been replaced with crystalline structures that gleamed with inner light. "Any attempt to transmit information about our world through normal channels will be detected and decoded by Imperial intelligence services. But personal memories, emotional impressions, family connections, those can be hidden within the carrier wave of a standard astropathic communication." I sat in the transmission chair while psychic dampeners were positioned around my head. The process was more intimate than I'd expected. I could feel the astropath's consciousness gently probing the edges of my mind, seeking the specific memories and emotions associated with my sister. Childhood moments on Cadia before our parents' deaths. The day we'd been separated, she to the Schola Progenium, and I to the Commissariat Academy. Our brief reunion 20 years ago, when duty had brought us both to the same war zone. "There," Master Cornelius said softly. "I can see her clearly in your thoughts. A woman of great intelligence and stronger will. She cares deeply about the truth, even when that truth challenges her fundamental beliefs." "That describes Elena perfectly," I confirmed. "She never was one to accept easy answers." The message we crafted was deceptively simple. A request for Elena to visit Kythera Prime to consult on unusual warp phenomena affecting local shipping routes. Standard inquisitorial business that wouldn't attract attention from other agencies. But embedded within the formal language were subtle references to conversations we'd had decades ago about the nature of human potential and the possibility of evolution beyond the Imperium's current limitations. "She'll understand," I said, as the transmission was prepared. Elena always said that humanity's greatest enemy wasn't Xenos or chaos, but our own failure to reach our full potential. The transmission itself took 3 hours to complete. I sat in the psychic interface chair, while Master Cornelius and his choir carefully encoded the message with layers of meaning that only Eleanor would be able to interpret. Around us, the collective consciousness of Kythera Prime provided a protective barrier, ensuring that no hostile psychic entities could interfere with the communication. When it was finished, I felt drained but oddly hopeful. For the first time since arriving at Kythera Prime, I had taken action that might lead to a positive outcome, rather than simply observing and documenting. Whether Elena would be able to respond, whether she would understand the true meaning of our message, whether she would be willing to risk her position and reputation to investigate our claims, all of that remained to be seen. "How long until we know if she received it?" I asked. "Standard astropathic communication to the Ultima Segmentum takes approximately 6 days, Master Cornelius replied. "If the Inquisitor responds immediately, we should hear back within 12 days. If she requires time to consider her response or arrange transportation, it could be considerably longer." 12 days. The warp storm was scheduled to dissipate in 11 days, according to Kythera's predictions. If Elena decided to investigate our claims, she would arrive to find a peaceful world showing no signs of the cosmic catastrophe that currently engulfed it. Without witnessing the storm and Kythera's response to it, would she be able to understand the full significance of what we were trying to tell her? "She'll understand," Governor Meridian said, apparently reading my concerns in my expression. "Your sister has spent years investigating phenomena that others dismiss as impossible. She's developed a healthy skepticism toward official Imperial doctrine. Most importantly, she knows you well enough to recognize when you're trying to communicate something of critical importance." The next few days passed in a strange combination of routine and revelation. The warp storm continued to rage around Kythera Prime, but life within the protective barrier went on much as it had for millennia. I attended city council meetings where citizens discussed infrastructure improvements and cultural programs with the same seriousness that other worlds reserved for military preparations and survival strategies. I observed school systems where children learned not just traditional subjects like mathematics and literature, but also cooperation, empathy, and collective problem solving. The youngest students, barely old enough to walk, already showed signs of the intuitive connection that would eventually allow them to participate fully in Kythera's unified consciousness. "Education is different here," explained Principal Sarah Chen, as we watched a class of 8-year-olds work together to solve a complex engineering problem. "We don't just teach facts and skills, we teach children how to think together, how to share insights, how to build on each other's strengths while compensating for individual weaknesses." I watched in fascination as the children approached their assignment, designing a bridge capable of spanning a hypothetical canyon while using minimal materials. Instead of competing against each other or working in isolation, they formed a single collaborative unit. One child contributed mathematical calculations, another provided artistic vision, a third offered practical construction techniques. Within minutes, they had produced a design that was both elegant and efficient. "How do you handle disagreements?" I asked. "What happens when children have conflicting ideas or personalities that clash?" "Conflict is rare when everyone shares the same fundamental goal," Principal Chen replied. "When disagreements do occur, we treat them as learning opportunities. Children learn to see problems from multiple perspectives, to understand why others might have different approaches, and to find solutions that incorporate the best aspects of conflicting ideas." It was a radically different approach to childhood development than anything practiced elsewhere in the Imperium. Most worlds emphasized competition, hierarchy, and individual achievement as ways to identify and cultivate talent. Kythera focused on collaboration, consensus, and collective success. The results spoke for themselves. Children who were not just smarter and more capable than their peers elsewhere, but genuinely happier and more fulfilled. On the 7th day after sending our message, I was invited to observe one of Kythera's most closely guarded secrets: their method of training new psychers. In most Imperial worlds, psychic ability was viewed as a curse at best and a death sentence at worst. Children who manifested psychic powers were either shipped off to the Scholastica Psychana for training as Imperial-sanctioned psychers, or eliminated to prevent chaos corruption. Kythera took a different approach. Psychic ability is natural human evolution, explained Psyker training coordinator Marcus Vale as we entered a facility that looked more like a garden than a training academy. Instead of suppressing it or fearing it, we nurture it. We teach young psychers to channel their abilities through the collective consciousness, using the unified will of our people as a stabilizing force. I watched children ranging in age from 6 to 16, practicing psychic techniques that would have terrified their counterparts elsewhere. They moved objects with their minds, communicated telepathically across vast distances, and even manipulated local weather patterns. But they did it all within the protective embrace of Kythera's unified consciousness, their abilities enhanced and stabilized by the collective will of their entire civilization. No corruption, I asked, though I already knew the answer. None. When a young psyker is connected to 27 billion other minds, all focused on positive human values, there's no room for chaos to take hold. The collective consciousness acts as a filter, allowing beneficial psychic energy to flow while blocking out harmful influences. It was the ultimate solution to humanity's greatest weakness, the vulnerability of psychers to chaos corruption. By creating a planetary-scale psychic network, Kythera had found a way to safely harness and develop psychic abilities without risking damnation. If this technique could be replicated elsewhere, the Imperium could potentially train vast numbers of psychers without fear of chaos infiltration. On the 10th day, as the warp storm began to show signs of weakening, Master Astropath Cornelius summoned me to the communication chamber with news that made my heart race. "We've received a response from Inquisitor Vex," he announced. "She's already en route to Kythera Prime aboard the battlecruiser Truthseeker. Estimated arrival time, 6 days." I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Elena had understood our message and was taking it seriously enough to investigate personally. But her arrival would also mark the beginning of Kythera Prime's greatest test. An Inquisitor investigating their world would bring scrutiny that could no longer be deflected with bureaucratic misdirection and helpful productivity reports. "What exactly did she say?" I asked. Master Cornelius activated a holographic display showing Elena's response. It was brief and coded, but unmistakably her. "Investigating anomalous psychic phenomena as requested. Bringing full spectrum analysis team. Prepare detailed reports on all unusual activities. Looking forward to family reunion." The last line was the key. Family reunion had been our childhood code for situations that required absolute honesty, no matter how uncomfortable the truth might be. Elena was telling me that she was prepared to hear everything we had to tell her, regardless of how it might challenge her preconceptions or threaten her position within the Inquisition. "She'll arrive 2 days after the storm dissipates," Governor Meridian observed when I shared the news with him. "Perfect timing. She'll see Kythera as it normally exists, but she'll also have access to all the data from our successful defense against the warp phenomenon." "Are you ready for this?" I asked. "Are your people ready to reveal themselves to the Inquisition?" "We've been preparing for this moment for decades," the governor replied calmly. "We always knew that eventually our differences would attract the attention of Imperial authorities. The question was never whether we would face investigation, but whether the investigator would have the wisdom to understand what they discovered. And if Elena doesn't? If she decides that Kythera represents an unacceptable deviation from Imperial orthodoxy?" Governor Meridian was quiet for a long moment, staring up at the storm that would soon dissipate to reveal the stars beyond. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of determination that reminded me why his people had been able to stand against cosmic forces that should have destroyed them. Then we will face whatever comes with the same unity that has protected us for 10,000 years. But I believe your sister will see what you have seen, Commissar. I believe she will understand that evolution is not heresy, but necessity. And I believe she will help us take the next step in humanity's journey toward its true potential. The warp storm broke on the 11th day, exactly as Kythera's predictions had indicated. I stood on the observation deck of the Righteous Fury and watched as the cosmic tempest simply faded away, leaving behind clear space and distant stars. There was no dramatic finale, no final surge of chaotic energy. The storm simply dissipated like morning fog, revealing a galaxy that continued to spin in its ancient patterns. Below us, Kythera Prime gleamed like a jewel in the void, unmarked by the forces that had raged around it for 11 days. The planet that had refused to die was about to face its greatest test. In 6 days, Inquisitor Elena Vex would arrive to determine whether Kythera Prime represented humanity's future or its doom. I could only hope that the bonds of family would prove as strong as the bonds that held Kythera's civilization together. Chapter 6. The Inquisitor's Arrival. The Truth Seeker emerged from the warp with the characteristic violence that marked all transitions between dimensions, its hull scarred by cosmic forces but intact. From the observation deck of the Righteous Fury, I watched my sister's ship take position in high orbit around Kythera Prime, its weapon arrays powered down but ready, its sensor arrays sweeping the planet with methodical precision. Elena Vex commanded respect wherever she went, and her ship reflected that authority. The Truth Seeker was a modified battlecruiser optimized for investigation rather than conquest. Its cargo holds filled with analytical equipment instead of additional weapons. Its crew compartments expanded to accommodate the specialists and servo skulls that assisted in her work. It was the ship of someone who believed that understanding was more powerful than destruction. "Incoming transmission from the Inquisitor," Communications Officer Hayes announced. "She's requesting immediate transport to the surface for herself and a small retinue." "Tell her I'll meet her at the landing site," I replied, though my stomach churned with nervous anticipation. I hadn't seen Elena in person for 20 years, and our relationship had always been complicated by the different paths our lives had taken. She served the Emperor through investigation and judgment. I served through inspiration and discipline. We respected each other's choices, but we didn't always understand them. 2 hours later, I stood on the landing platform in Kythera's capital city, watching as an Aquila lander descended through the crystal-clear atmosphere. The warp storm's departure had left the sky an almost painful blue, unmarked by clouds or atmospheric disturbance. It was the kind of perfect day that made you forget the galaxy was a hostile place filled with horrors beyond human comprehension. The lander's doors opened to reveal 3 figures in the distinctive power armor of the Inquisition. Elena stepped out first, her augmetic left arm gleaming silver against the dark blue of her carapace armor. At 47, she looked younger than her age, her brown hair still untouched by grey, her dark eyes as sharp and penetrating as ever. Behind her came 2 companions, a massive space marine in the colors of the Death Watch, and a tech priest whose extensive modifications made him more machine than human. "Thaddeus," Eleanor said, removing her helmet and favoring me with one of her rare, genuine smiles. "You look well for someone who's spent the last 11 days sitting in the middle of a warp storm." "I've had excellent hosts," I replied, embracing her carefully to avoid the sharp edges of her armor. "Elena, this is Governor Meridian of Kythera Prime. Governor, my sister, Inquisitor Elena Vex." "Inquisitor Vex," the governor said, offering a respectful bow. "We are honored by your presence. I trust your journey was without incident. The warp routes in this region are remarkably stable," Elena observed, her eyes studying the governor with the intensity I remembered from our childhood. She'd always been able to see through people, to perceive the truths they tried to hide. "Almost suspiciously stable, given the massive storm activity you've recently experienced. Kythera has always been blessed with relatively calm warp conditions, Governor Meridian replied diplomatically. We attribute it to the Emperor's favor. Elena's expression suggested she found that explanation insufficient, but she didn't challenge it immediately. Instead, she gestured to her companions. Allow me to introduce Battle Brother Sergeant Castor of the Death Watch and Tech Dominus Zerath of the Adeptus Mechanicus. They'll be assisting with my investigation. Sergeant Castor was impressive even by Space Marine standards, his black armor marking him as a veteran of countless campaigns against Xenos threats. His helmet remained sealed, but I could sense his constant vigilance as he scanned the peaceful city around us. Tech Dominus Zerath was a more unsettling presence, his mechanical limbs twitching with barely contained energy as dozens of servo skulls orbited his position, recording everything they encountered. Perhaps we should begin with a tour of your planetary defense systems, Elena suggested. I'm particularly interested in understanding how you maintained such effective protection against the recent warp phenomenon. It was the question I'd been dreading. How do you explain the unexplainable to someone whose job it is to identify and eliminate threats to Imperial orthodoxy? How do you convince an Inquisitor that what appears to be heresy is actually humanity's next evolutionary step? Of course, Governor Meridian replied smoothly. Though I think you'll find our methods rather unconventional. The tour that followed was carefully choreographed to reveal Kythera's secrets gradually, allowing Elena and her companions to adjust their expectations before encountering the most challenging revelations. We began with the planet's industrial facilities, where the evidence of unusual coordination was obvious, but could potentially be explained through conventional means. Production efficiency is remarkable, Tech Dominus Zerath observed, his mechanical voice buzzing with electronic static. These factories operate at 347% of baseline Imperial standards while maintaining 0.03% error rates. Query: what technological innovations enable such performance? The workers communicate exceptionally well, Governor Meridian replied, which was technically true. When everyone understands their role and how it fits into the larger picture, efficiency naturally improves. Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. She was beginning to suspect that there was more to Kythera's success than simple good management, but she couldn't yet identify what that something was. Sergeant Castor remained silent, his massive form moving with surprising grace as he observed the workers' movements and interactions. Our next stop was the agricultural zones, where the evidence of unusual abilities became harder to dismiss. Elena watched carefully as farmers guided their equipment with almost supernatural precision, their movements synchronized despite being separated by kilometers of farmland. The coordination patterns suggest shared consciousness, Tech Dominus Zerath announced after several minutes of observation. However, no technological interfaces are detected, no implants, no communication devices, no psychic amplification equipment. How interesting, Elena murmured, her voice carrying the tone I remembered from our childhood, when she'd discovered something that challenged her understanding of the world. Governor Meridian, I think it's time you explained what's really happening here. We were standing in the center of a vast wheat field, surrounded by golden grain that swayed in patterns too complex to be random. The farmers working around us moved with perfect coordination, their actions forming a symphony of agricultural activity that was beautiful to watch and impossible to explain through conventional means. Inquisitor, Governor Meridian said carefully. What I'm about to show you will challenge everything you think you know about human potential. I ask only that you observe with an open mind before making any judgments. Elena's hand moved instinctively to the bolt pistol at her side, though she didn't draw the weapon. Governor, if you're harboring heretical practices, it's better that I learn about them from you than discover them through investigation. At least that way, I can consider your intentions alongside your actions. Very well, the governor nodded. But first, let me ask you a question. In your experience as an Inquisitor, what is humanity's greatest weakness? Elena considered the question for a moment. Our vulnerability to chaos corruption, our tendency to fragment into competing factions, our limited lifespans relative to the threats we face. All correct. And what if I told you that Kythera Prime has found solutions to all three problems? I'd say you were either deluded or lying, Elena replied bluntly. Those aren't problems with solutions. They're fundamental limitations of human nature, are they? Governor Meridian smiled and raised his hand. Around us, the wheat field suddenly came alive with activity as thousands of farmers stopped their work and turned to face us. But instead of walking toward our position, they simply stood where they were and began to sing. It was the same song I'd heard in the cathedral during the warp storm, but now I could see its full effect on the material world. As the voices joined in harmony, the wheat began to glow with a soft golden light. The air itself seemed to shimmer with energy as 27 billion voices added their strength to the chorus. Elena's eyes widened as she felt the psychic pressure of unified consciousness pressing against the edges of her mind. It wasn't invasive or threatening, more like standing next to a vast ocean and feeling the gentle pull of its tides. But the sheer scale of what she was experiencing was unmistakable. "Emperor's throne," Sergeant Castor breathed, his first words since arriving on the planet. "I can feel them, all of them. Every mind on this world, thinking and feeling as one." Tech Dominus Xerath's servo skulls whirred in agitation as they detected energy readings that shouldn't exist. "Psychic phenomena detected. Planetary scale consciousness manifestation. Warning. This exceeds all known parameters for human psychic activity." Elena looked from the glowing wheat field to the singing farmers, to Governor Meridian, her face cycling through expressions of amazement, suspicion, and dawning understanding. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "How long have you been able to do this?" 10,000 years, the governor replied. "Since the first colonists arrived and discovered that Kythera Prime amplifies and stabilizes human psychic potential. We've spent millennia learning to work together, to think together, to become something greater than the sum of our individual parts. And the warp storm? We held it back through collective will. 27 billion people standing together, refusing to let chaos consume our world. It's the same force that protects us from corruption, enables our prosperity, and allows us to evolve beyond the limitations that plague the rest of humanity." Eleanor was quiet for a long time, processing the implications of what she was seeing. I could see the conflict in her expression, as her duty as an inquisitor warred with her intellectual curiosity and her genuine care for humanity's future. "This should be impossible," she said finally. "Psychic phenomena on this scale should have attracted every demon in the warp. Your entire population should have been consumed by chaos corruption within the first generation." "That's what we thought too," I interjected. "But Kythera's collective consciousness acts as a filter. Chaos can't corrupt what it can't divide. When everyone thinks as one, there are no individual weaknesses for demons to exploit." "Show me," Elena commanded. "Show me everything. If this is real, if this is truly what it appears to be, then the implications for the Imperium are beyond calculation." Governor Meridian nodded and gestured toward the capital city. "Come, let us show you the heart of what we've built here. Let us show you what humanity can become." As we walked back toward the city, the singing continued around us, carried by voices that spanned continents and connected minds that spanned generations. Elena walked in silence, her augmetic arm unconsciously recording everything she witnessed, while her natural hand remained near her weapon. The tension between wonder and duty was evident in every line of her posture. "Thaddeus," she said quietly as we approached the cathedral. "What are you asking me to do here?" "I'm asking you to see," I replied, "to truly see what Kythera Prime represents. Then make the choice that serves humanity's future rather than its fears. And if I decide that this represents too great a threat to Imperial stability," I looked at my sister, this woman who had dedicated her life to protecting humanity from its enemies, and spoke the truth that had been growing in my heart for days. "Then you'll have to choose between the Imperium as it is and the Imperium as it could be. Because Elena, what we found here isn't heresy, it's evolution." The cathedral doors opened before us, revealing the pillar of light that connected every soul on Kythera Prime. Eleanor stopped in the doorway, staring at the impossible sight before her, and I knew that her investigation, was about to become something much more significant than either of us had anticipated. The future of humanity hung in the balance, and the decision rested in the hands of an inquisitor who had spent her life hunting threats to the Imperium, only to discover that the greatest threat might be the Imperium's own resistance to change. Chapter 7. The Choice of Evolution. Standing in the cathedral before the Pillar of Light, Kythera Vex experienced something that few inquisitors ever encounter: absolute certainty shattered by undeniable truth. For 20 years, she had built her understanding of reality on the foundation that human psychic potential was inherently dangerous, that collective consciousness inevitably led to chaos corruption, and that the Imperium's restrictive policies regarding psykers were necessary for humanity's survival. Kythera Prime challenged every one of those assumptions. "By the Golden Throne," she whispered, her augmetic arm automatically recording the phenomenon, while her organic eyes struggled to process what they were seeing. This is impossible." The Pillar of Light pulsed with the combined life force of 27 billion human beings, each individual consciousness distinct yet harmoniously united with all the others. Tech Dominus Zerath's servo skulls circled frantically, their sensors overwhelmed by readings that exceeded their programming parameters. Sergeant Castor stood at rigid attention, his transhuman physiology allowing him to perceive psychic phenomena that would have driven normal humans to madness. "The energy output is consistent with a minor star," Tech Dominus Zerath reported, his mechanical voice tinged with something approaching awe. "Yet there is no fusion reaction, no plasma containment, no radiation leakage. The power source appears to be pure conscious thought translated into physical force." "Can you detect any signs of chaos taint?" Elena asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Negative. Psychic resonance patterns are entirely human in origin. No warp entity signatures detected. No evidence of demonic influence or corruption. The consciousness matrix appears to be pure." Eleanor approached the pillar slowly, her psychic senses extended to their fullest capacity. As an inquisitor, she had learned to detect even the slightest traces of chaos corruption. But here, she found nothing except an overwhelming sense of peace, unity, and hope. The very emotions that the Imperium taught were dangerous luxuries in a hostile galaxy. "How do you maintain individual identity within this collective?" she asked Governor Meridian, her scientific curiosity overriding her initial shock. "Watch," the governor replied, and suddenly Elena found herself aware of specific individuals within the vast consciousness network. She could perceive distinct personalities, unique thoughts, personal memories and experiences that remained intact despite their connection to the greater whole. There was Maria Santos, a manufacturing supervisor who contributed her expertise in logistics while maintaining her love of ancient poetry. There was Dr. James Chen, whose medical knowledge flowed freely through the network, while his personal memories of his late wife remained private and sacred. There was young Tommy Williams, whose childlike wonder and creativity added joy to the collective, while his individual dreams of becoming an artist remained entirely his own. "They're all still themselves," Eleanor murmured in amazement. "The unity doesn't erase individuality, it enhances it. Each person becomes more themselves when they're connected to something greater," Sister Cassandra explained, approaching from where she had been observing Eleanor's reaction. "Fear and isolation diminish human potential. Love and connection amplify it." Elena spent the next several hours studying Kythera's consciousness network with the thoroughness that had made her one of the Imperium's most respected investigators. She interviewed citizens from every level of society, observed their daily routines, and tested their responses to various stimuli. In every case, she found individuals who were healthier, happier, and more capable than their counterparts elsewhere in the Imperium. "The children," she said during a break in her investigation. "How do you protect them from psychic overflow when they're connected to adult minds?" "The network itself provides protection," explained educational coordinator Sarah Chen. "Adult consciousness naturally forms a protective barrier around developing minds, shielding children from experiences they're not ready to handle while still allowing them to benefit from the collective wisdom. Elena watched a group of 8-year-olds playing in a nearby park, their laughter carrying clearly through the cathedral's open doors. Even at their young age, they displayed coordination and empathy that surpassed what she'd seen in trained adults elsewhere. They shared toys without conflict, helped each other with playground challenges, and seemed genuinely incapable of the casual cruelty that marked childhood in most Imperial worlds. No bullying, she observed. No exclusion, no dominance hierarchies, no fear-based behaviors. When children can feel each other's emotions directly, hurting others becomes as impossible as hurting yourself, Principal Chen replied. Empathy isn't something we have to teach here. It's something they experience naturally. The implications were staggering. If Kythera's methods could be replicated elsewhere, the Imperium could potentially eliminate not just chaos corruption, but also the vast majority of social problems that plagued human civilization. Crime rates would plummet when criminals could feel their victims' pain. Political conflicts would become impossible when all parties could understand each other's perspectives. Resource allocation would become a matter of simple optimization rather than political maneuvering. But replication would require fundamental changes to Imperial doctrine, and Elena knew better than most how resistant the Imperium was to change. Sergeant Castor, she said, turning to her Death Watch companion. Your assessment? The Space Marine was silent for a moment, his enhanced senses continuing to analyze the psychic phenomena around them. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries of experience fighting the galaxy's worst threats. I detect no corruption, no heresy, no deviation from loyalty to the Emperor, he said carefully. These people represent human evolution in its purest form, stronger, wiser, more unified than baseline humanity. If such development could be replicated across Imperial space, the Tyranids would lose their primary advantage, Elena finished. Unity of purpose and instant communication are what make the hive mind so deadly. If human worlds could achieve similar coordination, the Great Devourer could be stopped, Sergeant Castor confirmed. Not just delayed or deflected, but actually defeated. These people could teach us how to fight as a species rather than as individuals. Elena felt a chill of anticipation mixed with terror. As an Inquisitor investigating Tyranid adaptation patterns, she had seen firsthand how the Great Devourer learned from each encounter with Imperial forces, evolving countermeasures to humanity's weapons and tactics. But the Tyranids had never faced unified human consciousness on a planetary scale. They had no adaptation for prey that could think and act as a single organism. Show me your military capabilities, she commanded. Show me how you fight when you fight as one. The demonstration that followed took place in the planet's primary training facility, where Governor Meridian had arranged for a large-scale military exercise. Elena watched in fascination as 10,000 PDF soldiers moved with perfect coordination, their actions synchronized despite being spread across hundreds of square kilometers of terrain. No radio communications, Tech Dominus Zerath observed, his sensors confirming the absence of technological coordination systems. No command hierarchy beyond the collective consciousness. Each soldier knows exactly where every other soldier is positioned, what they're thinking, what they're planning to do. The exercise simulated a defense against Tyranid invasion, with 1/3 of the soldiers playing the role of attacking bioforms. Eleanor watched as the human forces adapted to changing conditions in real time, their strategies shifting fluidly as new information became available to the collective consciousness. Traditional military doctrine is obsolete here, Sergeant Castor observed with professional admiration. No individual commanders can be eliminated to disrupt coordination. No communication networks can be severed to break unity. No psychological warfare can induce panic or despair when courage is shared among all participants. The implications for Imperial military doctrine were as revolutionary as everything else Elena had witnessed. The Astra Militarum's traditional approaches, massed infantry assaults, hierarchical command structures, individual heroism, would all be transformed by collective consciousness. Victory would no longer depend on superior technology or numbers, but on the unity of purpose that Kythera had perfected. As the day wore on and Elena's investigation continued, the weight of decision began to settle on her shoulders. Everything she had witnessed represented a fundamental advancement in human capability, a solution to problems that had plagued the Imperium for 10 millennia. But it also represented change on a scale that would terrify the very institutions she served. "Governor Meridian," she said, as they returned to the cathedral for evening prayers. "What do you want from me? What do you expect me to do with this information?" "We want you to help us share what we've learned," the governor replied simply. "Not through conquest or force, but through voluntary adoption. Other worlds should have the choice to evolve as we have evolved. The Imperium doesn't respond well to voluntary change. Most Imperial institutions view deviation from established norms as potential heresy, regardless of the benefits such deviation might provide. Then perhaps it's time for those institutions to evolve as well." Elena stopped walking and stared at him. "You're talking about fundamental reformation of Imperial society. You're talking about changes that could destroy everything the Emperor built, or transform it into something greater than the Emperor ever imagined," Governor Meridian replied calmly. "Inquisitor Vex, you've spent your career investigating threats to humanity. Tell me, which represents the greater threat to our species' future? A galaxy where we continue fighting the same battles for another 10,000 years, slowly losing ground to enemies that adapt faster than we do? Or a galaxy where we finally unlock our full potential and become the species the Emperor always intended us to be?" That evening, Elena stood on the cathedral's highest balcony, looking out over a city that glowed with the soft light of unified consciousness. Around her, 27 billion people shared their thoughts, dreams, and hopes in a symphony of human experience that had no parallel anywhere else in the galaxy. "What are you thinking?" I asked, joining her at the balcony's edge. "I'm thinking that I've never seen anything more beautiful or more terrifying," she replied. "If this spreads, it changes everything. The Imperium as we know it ceases to exist. Would that be such a terrible thing?" Elena was quiet for a long time, her augmetic fingers drumming against the balcony's stone railing as she processed the implications of her investigation. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of an inquisitor making a judgment that would affect the fate of humanity itself. "The Tyranids are coming, Thaddeus. My investigations have confirmed that the main hive fleets are still out there, adapting, evolving, preparing for another assault. The Imperium as it currently exists cannot defeat them. We're too divided, too rigid, too afraid of change to meet a threat that embodies evolution itself. And Kythera offers an alternative." "Kythera offers hope," she corrected. "Real hope, not the grim determination that passes for hope in most Imperial worlds. These people have found a way to be genuinely happy, genuinely secure, genuinely unified while remaining genuinely human." She turned to face me, and I saw in her eyes the same determination that had driven her to become an inquisitor, despite the odds against a woman from a minor world achieving such heights. "I'm going to recommend that Kythera Prime be designated a test site for voluntary consciousness integration programs. Other worlds in this sector will be given the opportunity to learn Kythera's techniques and decide for themselves whether to adopt them. The Inquisition will approve such a recommendation. Some will, others won't. But I have allies among the Ordo Xenos who understand that conventional approaches to the Tyranid threat are insufficient. When they see what I've documented here, when they understand what's possible." "Revolution," I said quietly. "Evolution," Elena corrected. "The revolution already happened here, 10,000 years ago. Now it's time to share the results with the rest of humanity." As the twin moons of Kythera Prime rose over the peaceful city, Elena Vex began composing the report that would either transform the Imperium or get us all executed for heresy. But for the first time since arriving on this remarkable world, I felt genuinely hopeful about humanity's future. The planet that had refused to die was about to teach the galaxy how to live. Chapter 8. The Seeds of Tomorrow. 3 months after Inquisitor Elena Vex submitted her report to the Ordo Xenos, the response came in the form of an entire investigation fleet emerging from the warp at the edge of Kythera's system. 12 ships bearing the markings of multiple inquisitorial ordos, accompanied by representatives from the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Ecclesiastarchy, and even a small contingent from Terra itself. The righteous fury had remained in orbit around Kythera Prime during the intervening months, ostensibly for routine patrol duties, but actually to provide early warning of any Imperial response to Elena's revelations. When the investigation fleet arrived, I was aboard the flagship Veritas Eternal, a massive battle barge that served as a mobile fortress for the most senior members of the Inquisition. Commissar Vex, Inquisitor Lord Matthias Korvac, greeted me in his private chambers, his ancient face bearing the scars of centuries spent hunting the Imperium's enemies. Your sister's report makes for fascinating reading, also deeply troubling reading. She claims to have discovered a form of human evolution that renders our most fundamental security protocols obsolete. She discovered the truth, I replied carefully, knowing that my next words could determine whether Kythera Prime lived or died. A truth that offers hope for humanity's future in a galaxy that grows more dangerous every day. Inquisitor Lord Korvac studied me with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of entire worlds. Behind him stood representatives of the investigation team, Tech Dominus Caelus of the Adeptus Mechanicus, Cardinal Severus of the Ecclesiastarchy, and most ominously, Interrogator Chaplain Nathaniel of the Dark Angels, whose presence suggested that the possibility of exterminatus was very much on the table. Hope is a dangerous commodity, Commissar, the Inquisitor Lord said finally. It can inspire greatness, but it can also lead to complacency and corruption. The Imperium has survived 10,000 years by being suspicious of anything that seems too good to be true. With respect, sir, the Imperium has survived 10,000 years by accepting slow decline as the price of stability, I countered, drawing on everything I'd learned during my time on Kythera Prime. We've become so afraid of change that we've forgotten how to grow, how to adapt, how to become something greater than we are. Cardinal Severus spoke up, his voice carrying the authority of the Ecclesiarchy. The Commissar speaks of growth and adaptation, but what of faith? What of humanity's relationship with the Emperor? This collective consciousness that Inquisitor Vex describes sounds dangerously similar to the kind of unity promised by heretical cults. Your Eminence, I encourage you to observe the people of Kythera Prime before making that judgment, I replied. Their faith in the Emperor is absolute, but it's a faith enhanced by understanding rather than diminished by fear. When 27 billion people can share their spiritual experiences directly, faith becomes a living reality rather than a distant hope. The investigation that followed was the most thorough examination of any world in Imperial history. Teams of specialists spent weeks studying every aspect of Kythera's society, from their agricultural methods, to their military tactics, to their spiritual practices. The citizens of Kythera Prime submitted to the scrutiny with patience and grace, answering every question and submitting to every test without complaint. Tech Dominus Caelus was particularly intrigued by the technological implications of collective consciousness. The efficiency gains are unprecedented, he reported to the investigation committee. Industrial production that exceeds all known parameters while maintaining zero-defect quality standards. Resource allocation algorithms that achieve perfect optimization without computational assistance. These people have accomplished through biological evolution what we have spent millennia trying to achieve through mechanical augmentation. Cardinal Severus was more conflicted, his initial suspicion gradually giving way to wonder as he witnessed the depth and purity of Kytherian faith. Their prayers have power, he admitted during one of our private conversations. Not the desperate pleading common to most Imperial worlds, but genuine communion with the divine. When 27 billion souls pray in unison, the Emperor's presence becomes almost tangible. Even Interrogator Chaplain Nathaniel, whose Dark Angel's training had prepared him to detect the slightest trace of chaos corruption, found himself forced to acknowledge what he was seeing. There is no taint here, he reported grimly, as if the absence of corruption was somehow disappointing. No demon influence, no heretical practices, no deviation from loyalty to the Emperor. If anything, Their faith is purer than that found on most shrine worlds. But the most significant moment came when Elena arranged for the investigation team to witness a full demonstration of Kythera's defensive capabilities. As the senior inquisitors watched from orbit, the planet's entire population united in consciousness to create a psychic barrier that encompassed their entire world. "Energy readings are off the scale," reported the Veritas Eternal's chief tech adept. "The psychic field they're generating is strong enough to deflect warp storms, resist orbital bombardment, and potentially interfere with Tyranid synapse creatures on a system-wide scale." Inquisitor Lord Korvac stared at the readings in silence for several long minutes before speaking. If these capabilities could be replicated across multiple worlds, if human consciousness could be unified on a sector-wide scale, the Tyranids would lose their primary advantage, Elena finished. Unity of purpose, instant communication, coordinated response to threats, everything that makes the hive mind so deadly could be matched by human consciousness operating on a similar scale. The implications were staggering. For the first time since the Tyranids had first appeared on the galactic stage, humanity had discovered a potential counter to the Great Devourer's greatest weapon. Not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through the evolution of human consciousness itself. The investigation committee's deliberations lasted for 2 weeks, conducted in sessions so classified that even I was excluded from most of them. During that time, I remained on Kythera Prime, watching as the planet's citizens continued their daily lives despite knowing that their entire civilization hung in the balance. "Are you afraid?" I asked Governor Meridian as we walked through the capital city's markets, where vendors sold their goods with the same cheerful efficiency that had characterized every aspect of Kytherian society. "Fear would be pointless," he replied calmly. "We've shown the investigation team everything we are, everything we've accomplished, everything we hope to become. If they decide that represents too great a threat to Imperial stability, then we'll face whatever consequences come with the same unity that has sustained us for 10 millennia. And if they approve, if they decide to support expansion of your methods to other worlds, then humanity takes its next step toward its true potential. Either way, we've remained faithful to our principles and to the Emperor's vision of what his people could become." The committee's decision, when it finally came, was both surprising and inevitable. Inquisitor Lord Korvac announced it personally, standing before the assembled leaders of Kythera Prime with an expression that mixed admiration with deep concern. "After extensive investigation, we have found no evidence of heresy, corruption, or deviation from Imperial doctrine on Kythera Prime," he declared. "Your methods are unorthodox, but they are effective, and they represent no threat to the Imperium's security." A collective sigh of relief seemed to emanate from the 27 billion people listening through their consciousness network. "However," the Inquisitor Lord continued, "we also recognize that the techniques you have developed represent potential solutions to threats that the Imperium currently cannot address through conventional means. Therefore, by the authority vested in me by the holy orders of the Emperor's Inquisition, I hereby designate Kythera Prime as a test site for voluntary consciousness integration programs." The formal announcement included specific protocols for expansion. Neighboring worlds would be offered the opportunity to learn Kytherian techniques through voluntary exchange programs. No world would be forced to adopt collective consciousness, but those that chose to do so would receive full Imperial support. Strict monitoring would ensure that the process remained free from chaos corruption, while detailed documentation would allow successful techniques to be replicated elsewhere. 6 months later, the first volunteer world, the agricultural planet Demeter 7th, successfully implemented a limited version of Kythera's consciousness network. Within a year, their crop yields had increased by 400%, while crime rates dropped to virtually zero. More importantly, when a small Tyranid splinter fleet attacked their system, the unified population managed to coordinate their defenses so effectively that the aliens were repelled without Imperial intervention. Word of these successes spread through the Ordo Xenos and gradually to other parts of the Imperial hierarchy. Cardinal Severus became a vocal advocate for what he termed sacred unity, the integration of consciousness in service to the Emperor. Tech Dominus Kylus began developing technological frameworks to support consciousness networks on worlds that lacked Kythera's natural psychic amplification. Elena's career flourished as she became the Inquisition's primary expert on consciousness integration, traveling from system to system to evaluate worlds that requested participation in the program. More importantly, she reported that preliminary modeling suggested a unified sector could potentially resist a full-scale Tyranid invasion. But perhaps the most significant change was in me. My experiences on Kythera Prime had transformed my understanding of what it meant to serve the Emperor. Instead of maintaining discipline through fear and punishment, I learned to inspire unity through understanding and shared purpose. The methods I'd witnessed on Kythera became the foundation for new commissariat training protocols that emphasized leadership over intimidation. As I stood in the cathedral of Kythera Prime 2 years after first arriving on this remarkable world, I listened to the voices of not just 27 billion souls, but 53 billion, as 3 additional worlds had joined the consciousness network. The pillar of light at the cathedral's heart now pulsed with the combined life force of entire civilizations, all united in purpose, while remaining gloriously individual in their contributions. "You did it," I told Governor Meridian as we watched the evening prayers begin. "You've changed everything." "We did nothing but remain true to ourselves," he replied with characteristic humility. "The changes you see are simply the natural result of humanity finally becoming what it was always meant to be." Above us, the stars shone with a brightness that seemed almost hopeful. Somewhere out there, the Tyranids were still coming, still evolving, still adapting to consume everything in their path. But for the first time in human history, we had something to offer in response that matched their greatest strength: unity of purpose backed by the power of consciousness itself. The planet that had refused to die had taught humanity how to live. And in a galaxy of endless war and darkness, 27 billion voices had begun singing a song of hope that would echo across the stars for generations to come. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there is only war. But on Kythera Prime and the worlds that followed its example, there was also something else. The promise that humanity's greatest battles still lay ahead, and that those battles could be won not through superior firepower or ruthless determination, but through the simple revolutionary act of thinking and fighting as one. The Emperor protects. But sometimes, the Emperor's children protect themselves by finally becoming worthy of his protection. 10 years have passed since the Kythera Accords formalized the consciousness integration protocols. 27 worlds now participate in what scholars have termed the Unity, a network of human consciousness that spans 3 entire subsectors and shows no signs of slowing its expansion. I write these words from the command deck of the New Dawn, flagship of the first truly unified Imperial fleet. Around me, officers from a dozen different worlds coordinate their activities through shared consciousness, their individual expertise enhanced by collective wisdom. We are 3 days out from the Helix Nebula, where long-range sensors have detected the approach of Hive Fleet Ouroboros. For the first time in Imperial history, humanity will meet the Tyranids as equals in the arena of unified consciousness. 20 billion minds thinking as one, coordinating the defense of human space with the same perfect unity that has made the hive mind so deadly. The irony is not lost on me that we learn to defeat the great devourer by becoming more like them, while remaining more human than ever before. Elena commands the Psychic Warfare Division, her talents enhanced by connection to thousands of other psychers across the Unity network. The days when human psychers were seen as dangerous necessities are ending. In their place, we're witnessing the rise of consciousness architects, individuals who can shape and direct the collective will of entire civilizations. The children born into Unity worlds show capabilities that would have been considered miraculous just a generation ago. They think faster, love deeper, and dream of futures that extend beyond individual lifespans to encompass the destiny of the entire human species. Some theological scholars argue that we are witnessing the next phase of the Emperor's plan for humanity, that consciousness unity represents the evolution he always intended for his people. The Imperium itself is changing, slowly, carefully, with the institutional caution that has allowed human civilization to survive 10,000 years of cosmic horror, but changing nonetheless. The Commissariat now teaches inspiration alongside intimidation. The Ecclesiarchy preaches unity alongside faith. Even the Adeptus Mechanicus has begun exploring the merger of biological and mechanical consciousness. Not every world has chosen to join unity, and that is as it should be. Choice remains the fundamental right that separates humanity from the alien horrors that threaten us. But every world that has chosen unity has prospered beyond their wildest expectations, achieving levels of peace, productivity, and happiness that would have been impossible under the old paradigm. As I watch the approaching Tyranid fleet through the observation ports of the New Dawn, I feel no fear. 20 billion human minds stand ready to meet this threat, their consciousness unified, but their spirits unbroken. We have learned to fight as one while remaining true to ourselves. We have discovered that evolution and tradition are not enemies, but partners in the dance of survival that defines all life in the galaxy. The voice of Kythera Prime reaches me across the void, Governor Meridian's consciousness joining with mine across impossible distances. The storm comes again, Commissar, but we have learned not to fear the storm. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there is only war. But the war has changed, humanity has changed, and in that change, perhaps, lies hope for a future where the darkness is not quite so grim, where the millennium ahead might be brighter than the 10,000 years behind us. The planet that refused to die has taught us all how to live. Now let us see if we can teach the galaxy how to thrive. The Emperor protects. And finally, we are worthy of his protection. The morning of the Great Convergence dawned with skies the color of burnished gold, as if the Emperor himself had painted the heavens to mark this momentous day. I stood in the cathedral's highest tower, watching as representatives from 47 worlds gathered in the plaza below. Each delegation bore the hopes and fears of billions of souls, come to witness what many believed would be either humanity's greatest triumph or its final heresy. Sister Cassandra joined me at the tower's edge, her storm-grey eyes reflecting the same mixture of anticipation and solemnity that filled the air itself. "Do you ever wonder what the Emperor truly intended for his children?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Every day," I admitted, thinking of the journey that had brought me to this moment. But I think intentions matter less than outcomes. Look at what we've become, what we've accomplished. If this isn't what the Emperor intended, perhaps it's something even better. What humanity could become when it finally learns to trust itself. Below us, the delegates took their positions in carefully arranged circles around the cathedral's base. Each world had sent their finest minds, scientists, soldiers, artists, philosophers, children whose innocence remained untainted by the galaxy's darkness. They came from hive worlds where billions lived in squalor, from death worlds where survival required constant vigilance, from paradise worlds that had forgotten what hardship meant. Governor Meridian emerged from the cathedral's main entrance, his presence immediately commanding the attention of every soul present. But it wasn't authority that drew their eyes. It was the simple, undeniable peace that surrounded him like an aura. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the plaza without technological amplification, carried by the psychic resonance that connected every person present. "Citizens of the Imperium," he began, "we gather today not to witness conquest or conversion, but to offer choice. The path we have walked on Kythera Prime for 10 millennia is not the only path, but it is one path. Today, we extend our hands to any who would join us in becoming more than we have ever been before." The ceremony that followed defied every protocol I had learned in my decades of Imperial service. There were no oaths of loyalty extracted under threat of death, no forced conversions backed by military might. Instead, there was invitation. Each delegate was offered the opportunity to experience temporary connection with Kythera's consciousness network, to feel, for just a few moments, what it meant to think and feel as part of something greater than themselves. I watched as Planetary Governor Marcus Vale of the Forge World Metallica approached the Pillar of Light, his cybernetic enhancements whirring nervously as he extended his organic hand toward the radiant column. When his fingers made contact, his entire body went rigid for a moment before relaxing completely. Tears began streaming down his scarred cheeks as he experienced, perhaps for the first time in decades, the simple joy of connection with other human beings. "I can feel them," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "All of them. Every worker in every factory, every child in every school, every dreamer reaching for stars they've never seen. How did we forget that we were meant to be together?" One by one, the delegates stepped forward to experience the touch of unity consciousness. Some recoiled in fear, their minds unable to accept the vulnerability that true connection required. Others lingered, reluctant to sever the link with something so fundamentally beautiful. A few wept openly as they felt, for the first time, what it meant to be truly understood by another consciousness. Cardinal Matthias of the Shrine World. Ophelia 7 spent nearly an hour connected to the network, his face cycling through expressions of amazement, fear, and finally, absolute certainty. When he finally stepped back from the pillar, his first words changed the course of Imperial theology forever. "This is prayer made manifest," he declared to the assembled crowd. "This is communion with the divine given physical form. We have spent 10,000 years shouting our prayers into the void, hoping the Emperor might hear us across the vast distances of space and time. These people have learned to pray together, to join their voices in harmony that transcends individual limitation." The theological implications rippled through the crowd like a stone thrown into still water. If unity consciousness represented a form of prayer, if collective thought was itself a form of worship, then Kythera Prime hadn't deviated from Imperial doctrine. They had perfected it. But it was the children who provided the day's most powerful testimony. A group of young people from 17 different worlds, ranging in age from 8 to 16, had formed their own temporary consciousness network during the ceremony. Their combined voices rose in a song that had no words but needed none, a melody that spoke directly to the soul about hope, growth, and the possibility of a future brighter than any past. "Listen to them," Elena said, joining our vigil in the tower. "Those children have known each other for less than a day, but they're singing in perfect harmony. They're sharing dreams, fears, hopes, and aspirations as naturally as breathing. This is what we could all become, Thaddeus. This is what humanity could be if we just had the courage to reach for it." As the ceremony continued into the evening, I found myself thinking about the long path that had brought us to this moment. The fears and doubts that had plagued me during those first days on Kythera Prime seemed distant now, replaced by a certainty that felt as solid as the cathedral stones beneath my feet. The galaxy would always be dangerous. The Tyranids would continue their relentless advance. Chaos would forever seek to corrupt and destroy, and countless other threats would emerge from the darkness between the stars. But for the first time in 10,000 years, humanity had an answer to those threats that didn't require sacrificing its soul in the process. "What happens now?" I asked Governor Meridian as the last delegates completed their experience with the consciousness network. "Now we grow," he replied simply. "World by world, system by system, soul by soul. Not through force or coercion, but through example. We show the galaxy what's possible, and we let each world decide for itself whether to embrace that possibility." Above us, the stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, their ancient light a reminder that the universe was vast beyond comprehension. Somewhere among those points of light, other worlds were making the same choice that faced every delegate who had experienced unity consciousness today. The choice between isolation and connection, between fear and hope, between surviving and truly living. The planet that had refused to die had become the seed from which a new form of human civilization would grow. And as I watched the delegates from 47 worlds depart to carry news of what they had experienced back to their home systems, I knew that the real story was just beginning. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there is only war. But war, I had learned, takes many forms. Sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with bolter and blade, but with the simple revolutionary act of refusing to accept that darkness must be eternal. The morning would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new choices to be made. But tonight, 27 billion voices rose in harmony across Kythera Prime, and their song carried a message that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. We are not alone. We are not forgotten. We are not lost. We are human, and we are finally becoming worthy of that designation.